Is Mike McCarthy a lock to return in 2025? We'll break it down on this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. On today's show, we are answering your mailbag questions. And Landon, we've got a bunch of them about Mike McCarthy. But I want to go with this one from Cliff. How bad is it that we want to keep Mike McCarthy because we know that the alternatives might be worse with the Jones boys at the helm? And is he a lock to return in 2025?
That's actually quite a few questions in there, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's comprehensive, and I think we need to kind of discuss it a little bit. I don't know how much of a lock it is, but let's discuss this. There is a phenomenon that is happening, and you and I were talking about it before the show, where I think you mentioned it started with Tom Brady, but Troy Aikman has mentioned it. It just feels like several key members of the NFL media, unprompted seemingly, have started kind of promoting the idea that Mike McCarthy should come back as the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. It's hard not to feel like at times that this is something that's being inserted by the Joneses, right? Like that this isn't a seed that's being planted by somebody. It just kind of happened all at once and not very much in an organic way at all, right? And this is the kind of thing that, we've seen from the Cowboys before, where they start a whisper campaign, and then, by the time it gets to Jerry and Steven, they seem like the reasonable people on this topic, right? This is all a very long-winded way of saying I do feel like there is some entity pushing for McCarthy to come back. Now, what we may discover is that this is all a whisper campaign by Mike McCarthy, and
honestly, that's my gut feeling. I feel like it is.
Okay.
And maybe I think it's more like Tom Brady and Troy Aikman telling you, hey, you're not going to get the coach that you think you're going to get to come in and replace Mike McCarthy. It's almost like the devil is better than the devil that you might not, right? Yeah. And hey, if you want McCarthy gone, that's fine, but I promise you're not getting Ben Johnson or Bill Belichick to come in and replace him.
I actually don't think that these are different sides. I actually think that I personally think that Mike McCarthy, Jerry, and Steven are all on the same page that they want Mike McCarthy to come back. I think it's about convincing the Cowboys fandom of this, right? About that all of this campaign is a campaign to convince Cowboys fandom that despite the fact that maybe McCarthy should have been fired at the end of the season, and now that we've gone through a bad, terrible season, Mike McCarthy should come back. And look, I think that some of their arguments are sound. I honestly, again, I think I go back to the thing that if you wanted to fire Mike McCarthy, if you didn't think that he was good enough to do the job to get you to the Super Bowl, the time to do it was last year, not this year, and so, because now if you're going to have to bring it back, you're going to have to go through a contract negotiation with him. He's not going to, just readily, be willing to give up or take less money or any of the things you hope for. So you're going to need to find a way to negotiate with him, get what you want out of the situation. And then at the end of the day, you're probably still going to have the same kind of, I would call it good, not great situation with McCarthy and the coaching staff as it is currently. Because the thing that you and I have discussed that we would like, right, is if Mike McCarthy is coming back, we would, again, I shouldn't speak for you, but I'm assuming you feel this way.
Yes.
That we would like a new play caller. I have no problem with Mike McCarthy, the CEO coach. In fact, I think he's done a very good job as a head coach in the kind of management aspect of that. Where I have real problems is with some of the design and the play calling of the offense, right? And I think that's going to be really difficult to kind of wrestle away from him. So I don't disagree with some of the folks that have said, you may be careful what you wish for, because if you go out to the coaching, field to get your new head coach, you may not get what you want. Even if you go out and get Ben Johnson or Gus Bradley, or not Gus Bradley, Joe Brady is what I meant to say, not Gus Bradley. Do not bring in Gus Bradley,
Yeah,
please.
don't bring in Gus Bradley.
But Joe Brady, even if you go get one of those kind of unknown guys, there's unknown there, right? That wouldn't deter me, but I can at least see the argument that's being made on that side. But I also think that it's being made for the benefit of Cowboys fandom to kind of buy into what the Cowboys front office is like.
Honestly, I feel indifferent about Mike McCarthy, but one of the things I don't quite understand is coming out of the playoffs last year, when it was announced that the Cowboys were bringing back Mike McCarthy, I think it was pretty well understood from Cowboy fans and the national media, like Mike McCarthy is going to have to win probably multiple playoff games in order to keep his job. And now they've had this season where, I mean, they were out of it before Thanksgiving, right? Like they were, this is a bad season. And now it seems like his status is more solidified than ever. And I don't quite understand, like, how did we get from where we were in January, where it seemed like, hey, unless they made it to the NFC Championship game, he was gone, to, hey, the Cowboys would be lucky to have Mike McCarthy back after a 7-10 season.
Well, because this is all an expectations game. This is not a result, like the results based issue. Like that's on the that's on the ownership side to decide. And obviously I think that they're making some kind of mistake here, but I think that the reason that this is now sellable to the Cowboys fandom is because the expectations have fallen through the floor. Even after all the terrible start the Cowboys had, then all the injuries, and then on top of that, you lose Dak Prescott. Nobody expected this team to do anything. So for them to win 3 out of 4 games, 3 out of their last 4 games, and really what should have been 4 out of their last 4 games, I think has at least given enough fuel to the arguments that it can be made. Now, I will say this. If the Cowboys get their butts kicked by Tampa Bay at home again, I think this argument swings right back around the other way, at least as far as the fandom goes, right? I do think that there is seemingly been some success in kind of convincing some Cowboys fandom that Mike McCarthy is probably the best way to go. And again, I'm not discounting the argument that some folks are making that there may not be a better head coach option out there. But I also think that we know what this situation is. And if you bring back the same coaching staff with the same players and expect a different result, well, we all know what that's the definition of.
Yeah. What do you think is going to happen? I just want your prediction. Like, do you think Zimmer and McCarthy come back next year?
I honestly, I didn't just say this. I honestly think this is a huge game. Seriously, because you can go back and look at the last 4 games and look, the Bengals, are a former Super Bowl caliber team. They have an MVP playing at quarterback right now. There's zero doubt, but the Bengals are still not a good team, right? And the Cowboys have won, like I said, 3 of their last 4, but they haven't really beaten anybody worth, anybody decent, truly, right? I mean, the closest game that you could say that they won that was a big game was Pittsburgh, and that was before they changed over to Russell Wilson, right? So the Washington game, I guess, kind of counts, but that's still a division game. My point being that, like, I just think that if they lose to Tampa in a fashion that they may, considering what Tampa did to the Chargers last weekend, I do think that the goodwill around Mike McCarthy will swing all the way back, at least in Cowboys fandom, and then that may put this plan to bring McCarthy back in jeopardy. So I think right now, if I was betting odds, I would probably bet on Mike McCarthy because of just the environment around us. But I also think that this game is going to have a big dictation on exactly where we end up.
Because the next 3 games are hard, right? You play Tampa Bay, and then it's Philadelphia, and then Washington. And I think they're going to be underdogs. I mean, they are underdogs in all 3 of those games. If they lose all 3 of them to end the season, I think you lose a little bit of that goodwill that you kind of banked. People aren't going to remember the win against Washington earlier in the year, or the Carolina win. So I think you're right. This is a big game. I'm still going to bet that they make a change. I think
that's true.
I would not be surprised if they try to bring back Zimmer, but bring back a new head coach. But I don't feel, listen, depending on the day, I could go either way, Leon. Like, I
I
don't have
know.
a strong take on this either way.
I feel like, the reason I bring up the Tampa game as opposed to those last two games is because it does feel like McCarthy has done a good job in these division games, and he's done a good job of beating the opponents that he's supposed to beat. Tampa represents a good team that is not a division team, right?
Right.
And that is where the Cowboys have struggled, right? Even before all this of this season, even before the injuries and all this, I think the mark against McCarthy's Cowboys has been, can they beat the upper echelon teams to get where they need to go in the playoffs? And frankly, I understand Cooper Rush is playing, but this is still another one of those games. And if you lose this game and you aren't even in the same stadium as this team, it's going to be hard to convince anybody like, hey, Mike McCarthy's coaching is the difference in getting us over the hump here, when we've seen to the contrary season after season after season.
All right, let's talk about Brock Hoffman, who has played really well in replacement of Zach Martin. Could he be a full-time starter in 2025? We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That is FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. This episode is brought to you by the College Football Playoffs presented by TNT. It's that time of year. The College Football Playoffs are back, and with the newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever before, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT sports coverage of the College Football Playoffs begins on December 21st, starting with the College Football Playoff Kickoff Show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern. Leading into our first matchup, it is the Southern Methodist University Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the College Football Playoffs presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We are answering your Twitter questions. And we've got this one from Phil. He said, we need to talk about my boy, Brock Hoffman. Should we invest a high pick on the offensive line in next year's draft, or is the job his? Now, he also had a second part of this question that I want to address. It says, yes, I'm aware we need to re-sign him, but I assume this will be done. So I went and did some research. Technically, he is a free agent after this year. However, the Cowboys have the exclusive rights on him, which means he'll be back. And then in 2026, he'll be a restricted free agent, and the Cowboys can offer an original round tender, a first round tender, second round tender. So I know that if you go to like Over the Cap right now or any of those sites, it'll say that he is a free agent in 2025. He will be back next year. You don't need to worry about that.
Yeah, like the exclusive rights free agent is
never leave. Never.
Yeah, if the team wants you, you're not going anywhere.
You're not going.
So, and really with as an RFA, really too. If you wanted, if they want you, they'll keep you.
I mean, because they'll put a second round tender on.
Yeah,
teams are not trading second round picks for 27-year-old offensive linemen, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, and listen, I think the conversation about whether Brock Hoffman has, earned that starting spot or not, I think we have to go back to the beginning of training camp this year. He was penciled in as the starter at center. And I think, he had done everything that he had done to earn that opportunity in the offseason already, right? So I imagine, he's done more than he ever did last year to earn that opportunity to get the starting spot as a center in training camp this year with his play. So absolutely, I think he's done enough to at least earned the pencil in starter at either center or guard. And I think that's considering what we know about how the Cowboys feel about Brock Hoffman, I absolutely think he's going to get the opportunity to be the starter next year. Now, I think, again, what was going to be interesting is to see how they decide to arrange this, right? Because, I will not ever stop mea culping about Brock Hoffman. I mean, obviously we missed on that. And my issue with him at the time was that I didn't feel like he was athletic enough, right? Like, physically powerful and strong enough. And that still is a little bit of a concern, but we have seen him operating just fine with his athleticism and his strength. So having, still keeping that in mind, I think I would still like to see him potentially play center. If you're going to end up starting Brock Hoffman, maybe what we do is try to see if Cooper Beebe can slide back out to right guard where, Zach Martin obviously has been holding it down for a decade plus.
Is it just a size thing? Because, I mean, Cooper Beebe is significantly bigger than what?
Yeah, it is. It is a size thing. Yeah, I think that Cooper Beebe is just more physical, more powerful player, right? I just think he's going to be able to move bodies out. And I think the thing that makes Hoffman so great is his tenacity, his attitude, his smarts, his intelligence, right? And his technique. And I think all of those traits really fit a fantastic center, right? So I just think that if they can find a way to at least get some looks with Hoffman at center and Beebe at guard, maybe this week, maybe next week, depending on when Beebe comes back, I think that will be a great opportunity to get a look at what your options are to where to play Brock Hoffman when we come into the training camp in 2025.
I think my goal on the offensive line would be to find the best 5 when it comes to run blocking. I mean, because this offense just doesn't work. And frankly, this team does not work when they can't run the ball at all. And I know that Dak can put up MVP type of numbers when you have a good pass blocking offensive line. But if they want to accomplish the goals that they want to accomplish, they've got to be able to run the ball. So whatever combination you can figure out that best helps you run the ball, whether it means Tyler Smith at left tackle or Tyler Smith at left guard, Beebe at right guard compared to Beebe at center, I don't care. Whatever gives you the best opportunity to run the ball is what I want them to do. And it does seem like Hoffman's aggressiveness, mean streak gives them a little something different that they just haven't had on their offensive line since Mark Colombo. I mean, I'm trying to, who's been the last offensive lineman that's given them that grit that they've needed?
Ron Leary.
Honestly, yeah. Probably, yes, Ron Leary.
Listen, here's the thing. I think you hit on a really great point. I just kind of want to piggyback on it, that I think one thing that we have not discussed enough in relation to the Cowboys' woes this season is the NFL changed this season, right? The way that offenses are playing, the way that defenses are playing, the NFL has changed. It just wasn't as much of a passing league this year as it has been previously. The trend towards more passing seemed to have been stymied a little bit by the way that defenses are playing. The rise of the shell coverage defenses by guys that are in different parts of the league now that are all kind of trying to keep passing with a cap on top of it. And I think that the Cowboys were ill prepared for needing to be able to rely on the run to win games, right? They were hoping to get the running game going as the season went on so that they could have it, which it did, which they got as the season. But the problem was that the league had already changed. And by the time that the early part of the season started, they needed that run game to attack some of the way that the defenses were playing Dak, attack some of the way that you wanted to be able to control the clock. And because the Cowboys couldn't do that, I think that really helped contribute. It's one of the many different factors, right? We talked about it. It felt like it was a bunch of different factors that all went wrong that kind of caused the collapse. This was one of the factors. And I think it's something to keep in mind for next year is you need to make sure that you have a strong running game. You need to find a way to transcribe what you've done here at the end of the season into next year, because it's going to be beneficial to helping the offense when Dak is back. Because you need to have a rushing attack to play in 2024 football as it started to kind of slide, as the great wheel of football X's and O's turns its way back to a run game situation. You're probably going to start seeing more defenses, get bigger bodies and move away from the smaller, lighter guys and kind of bulk up a little bit in the middle. So as there's the shifting sands in the NFL, the Cowboys need to be able to adjust as well.
Meanwhile, the top 2 edge rushers in this class are like 238 pounds. So maybe it won't.
It's gonna take a while. It's definitely gonna be a slow transition because it caught everyone by surprise this year, right?
This one kind of piggybacks off that question. From @Hobson3233. Is Ezekiel Elliott on the roster next year? I honestly just thought about dismissing this question, but I don't know. Like, what do you think?
I mean, I can't see how, right? Like, you have to go get another running. I mean, I can't see how.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say that.
You need to get an RB2 that you feel like you can rely on to basically do what Rico Dowdle is doing at times.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. You need a passing down back. I mean, that's really, if there's one area where I feel like Rico still needs to kind of develop a little bit is as a pass protector. And as a pass receiver, he's dynamic with the ball in his hands, but he's not like a dynamic route runner necessarily. So I think if you could find a guy in the draft that can be, a lightning to his thunder, I think that would be very beneficial. But you certainly don't want to go, I don't know what a thicker, slower version of Thunder is, but like that's what Zeke is currently.
I was gonna say an Avion Kason type of back for you, old school Cowboys.
Wow, that's a throwback.
There you go.
Sure.
Let's talk about Trey Lance and why he's not playing at all for the Cowboys right now. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. If you love watching the game, you're gonna love PrizePicks. The easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy, whether it's football, basketball, or any of your favorite sports. PrizePicks makes your holidays bigger and brighter. You can now win up to 100 times. No, not just 100, but 1,000 times your money on PrizePicks. Plus, this holiday season, they're giving away over $30 million in rewards during Picksmas, and they're offering 2 free picks in December. And when your picks hit, PrizePicks makes it easy to cash out. You can get your money in as fast as 15 minutes. This week, I'm taking Saquon Barkley to score over 1.5 touchdowns. He didn't get one last week. I think he's going to get multiple this week. It's so easy to make these picks. It's so fun to challenge my friends. Go do it right now on PrizePicks. Download the app today. Use promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly when you play just $5. PrizePicks, run your game. This episode is brought to you by Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions that you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? It definitely happened to me. I'm blaming my wife. She gets all these subscriptions that I don't even know about, and we're paying $8, $10, sometimes even $15 a month on things we don't use. Rocket Money has made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finance. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions. It monitors your spending and helps lower your bills so that you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's your subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals that you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That is rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the new Locked On NFL show. 2 shows every single day. 1 in the morning with Tyler Rowland, 1 in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins, available wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Landon, this last question comes from Charlie. He wants to know, what is the latest on Trey Lance? It feels like we invested a lot of draft capital in him, only to see him benched. We haven't seen him at all over the last couple of games. What do you think is going on here?
All right. I think to have this conversation, we need to have a conversation about the value of potential versus known quantities, right? Let's talk about Cooper Rush real quick, right? Cooper Rush went 5-1, if I'm not mistaken, in 2021 when he was
2022.
2022. And then he was 1-0 in 2021, and then 4-1 when he came in 2022.
Yep.
And then after that, after showing a pretty good stuff, during that stretch, the Cowboys re-signed him without too much trouble, right? Like there wasn't very much issue. It wasn't like a bidding war or anything, even though backup quarterbacks who win multiple games is not something that's very common, right? Meanwhile, Trey Lance got traded for a 4th-round pick and again has done almost nothing in this league other than what we've seen in San Francisco early in his career. And I think that shows you right there, like the difference between a known quantity that is less than a starter and the mystery box from Family Guy, right? It could be a boat. Who knows, right? And I think that there's always the value of the unknown, right? Oh, who knows what this could be? I think my thought process is that the Cowboys have already made their decision that they want to bring Trey Lance back.
I think so as well.
And I think by playing Trey Lance, I think that probably Cooper Rush and Trey Lance, and for what I've seen from Cooper Rush, especially with the fumbles that we've had for just coming out of nowhere at times, and just some of the awkward throws on short passes, I honestly think that Trey Lance, Cooper Rush probably would be producing about the same at this point if you got them into the game, right? I think the game planning may be a little bit different. You would do some different things to kind of help Trey, play to his strengths. I think ultimately at the end of the day, it might be 6-1, half dozen the other. You may end up winning those games. Maybe you lose 1 or 2 less, right?
Here's I think the difference. I don't know if like CeeDee Lamb is getting the same numbers that CeeDee Lamb is getting with Trey Lance on the field.
Maybe
right?
so. Maybe that's.
And I don't know like if Luke Schoonmaker and Jake Ferguson are continuing to develop. I do think Trey Lance would give you more in the run game, right? And he would be able to use his legs, and maybe you're better in the red zone. But I think in terms of developing other players on your team, Cooper Rush is probably helping you out more.
That's probably fair. And again, I think you pointed at something out before the show when we were talking about it. I want to make sure that we bring up is that McCarthy clearly has a preference for guys that are comfortable and familiar with the scheme, right? So I think that that's part of it. I think the other part is that because and going back to what I said before, I think because they have made the decision to bring him back, and because of the slight preference for Cooper Rush to kind of help, develop some of these other guys, he also has a lot more familiarity with the second team guys, which is why you've seen Tolbert and Brooks and some of these other guys be more involved, right? I think that they don't necessarily want to expose what happens if you play Trey Lance and he is incredible, right? Like ultimately, then you are going to lose him on the free agent market, right? Like someone's going if Trey Lance got played was a starter next week, and he goes out there and he rushes for 75 yards, throws for 275 yards, and scores 2 touchdowns through the air and 1 touchdown on the ground. Somebody is calling his agent the next week to kind of feel out familiarity for when the free agent market starts.
But not you. He wouldn't get the deal that would be like giving you a 3rd or 4th round pick, like in compensatory. It would do is push him out of the price range where you could bring him back as a backup, because nobody is signing Trey Lance to be a starter. I think Dallas just would like to get him back on like here's 2 years, $5 million. Come stick around in the scheme a little bit longer.
And that is exactly the loophole that the Cowboys are trying to weave through, right? Is that they feel confident enough about Trey Lance moving forward. Maybe they like the person, they like the way he's developed, but they don't want to expose him to the rest of the NFL for the chance that he actually does. Suddenly it clicks and suddenly he's great. And now you've lost him because someone's willing to pay more, but not enough for you to get any kind of comp pick for it. And so basically that is the way that you get nothing from Trey Lance, right? Is by playing him and then having him signed away to a deal that doesn't give you a comp pick. As it stands right now, I have very strong confidence that if the Cowboys get to the rest of the season, Trey Lance doesn't play another snap and they want to re-sign him, they will be able to re-sign him, and to a deal that is probably pretty reasonable for his potential, right? And I think that that's ultimately what they're trying to do. We can make an argument. We can make all kinds of arguments about whether that's prudent, about whether trading a 4th round pick for the right to negotiate with the quarterback, 2 or 3 years down the road is smart. But I would argue, that's fair. I would argue it isn't terribly far off from drafting a 5th round quarterback that you never play as well, right? And that's
I was going to compare it to like when you have you have somebody in training camp that's awesome, but you clearly want to get him on the practice squad. You remember the
Yeah.
days where you would have
Yeah,
4
well,
preseason games. It's like, hey, we're just not going to play this guy in the
That's right.
3rd and 4th preseason game because we're going to waive him and try to get him back on our practice squad. We know he can play at least a little bit, but not good enough where we feel like he needs to be on the 53-man roster. It's not quite apples to apples, but it's close.
I think that's definitely the closest comparison, right? Is that they're trying to stash him in a way that they're well, let's be honest, they're depressing his market is what they're
Yes.
trying to do.
Which
They're trying
sucks
to
for Trey Lance.
Yes, it does.
But in the long run, it might be best for Trey Lance,
That's
right?
right.
Because a lot of times these young quarterbacks that aren't going to be high-end starters, they struggle to catch on because they've been with 6 different coaches and 7
OCs.
different play callers.
Yep.
But I think Cooper Rush is a good example of how it can work, right? Cooper Rush has been with the same head coach and he's played behind the same starting quarterback for 5 years now, right?
Yeah.
And Cooper Rush is somebody who doesn't have a great arm, who isn't overly accurate, who's not a great athlete, who's going to have like a 10-year NFL career because he's been in the same system for most of it.
Yeah, and again, like that's ultimately, why that's also the reason why he didn't get signed to another team, right? Is because he's a specialist, a McCarthy, a Cowboy specialist, however you want to say that. So I think, I think that's what they're trying to do is depress Lance's market enough that they can get him for cheaper than what he would get if he showed out, and certainly avoid a situation where he gets enough interest where he gets signed to a deal that's just cheap enough that the Cowboys don't get any kind of compensation for it. The best way the Cowboys to get return on their investment at this point is to re-sign Trey Lance at the end of the year to a cheap deal, hope that he develops, and then go from there.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. On tomorrow's show, we've got the crossover with Locked On Buccaneers. Make sure you check that out. On Friday, Landon and I will be back to preview Cowboys Bucks Sunday Night Football. Go follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosier, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.